Hello guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another video. I'm going to be answering your questions in today's video regarding Chelsea. I got quite a few questions to get through, and thank you once again for all of your interactions and submitting those questions on my YouTube community page and also on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Really cool to get into them and really cool to have these interactions because I always like doing Q&As. I think we can delve into some questions that maybe get lost during the week when we're talking about news and reviewing games, and we can reflect a little bit more. So I hope you guys do enjoy the content and interacting with it. Apologies to those questions once again I cannot get to, but as well, before we do get into those questions, got my team selector for Aston Villa coming out later today. So 2 videos today on Saturday before the game at Villa Park tomorrow. So make sure hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you do not miss that video. And if you are enjoying the content, hit that like button on the road to 30k so we can get more people watching the channel. But let's get into your questions. Firstly, here from Tom Coley, colleague at Football London. What's the best way for Pulisic to impress Graham Potter for the rest of this season and turn opinions on him? I do just quickly want to throw out a cheap plug for my long read sort of article for Football London today on Christian Pulisic. I'll link below. So I won't delve into his old Chelsea career because I think that kind of piece is looking at a lot of factors of what's happened for him at Chelsea and where could he go next. I think simply it's when he does get those opportunities, particularly on the left side of attack, which clearly is his best position, or the position you're probably going to get the most impact from him, just performing like he did against Wolves. I think if you can get that out of him more on a regular basis, happy days. Can he jump up to be anything more than that? I think that's a challenge, not only in the sense that he has quite clear competition in that area with Raheem Sterling, a very experienced player who on form I think is just a better player. And also, where does he see his career, particularly at the age of 23? I think wanting to have more football, and particularly at the World Cup, where he's going to quite clearly be a guaranteed starter and inspirational figure for his country. Does he reassess things in January? But when he does get those opportunities under Graham Potter, if he takes them, he's going to be praised. Despite what some noise on social media tells you, I think Chelsea fans will be happy with Christian Pulisic if he plays well and will want to see him continue playing well. So hopefully we see that in the coming months, and that's what I think he has to do. TK asks, do you think Chelsea are capable of winning the Premier League with the squad we have? There are maybe some variables in there that I feel like they're sort of a step forward in the right direction compared to recent years. I mean, if we get Aubameyang scoring say 10 to 15 goals this year, it's going to be nowhere close to Erling Haaland, obviously, because he's just breaking the records this year, but that would seem like a step in the right direction. If the attack starts producing, that's a step in the right direction. But I still feel like there are not only maybe certain parts of this squad that still need refreshing or rebooting. I think for me it's still midfield. It's that one area that has been missed for so long, and I'm sure you guys are tired of me hearing me say it. But I still think that area where we have had players in that area who I think do their own skill set quite well in terms of dribbling, in terms of resisting the press, in terms of keeping hold of the ball. I think you want a player who, if you can find one who has a collection of those abilities and put them into one player who can kind of be very mobile but very comfortable on the ball, can really impact things, can add a level of physicality, and also maybe license for us to be more attacking in certain games. So until that happens, I think that's going to be one step where we really need to take, and hopefully the club will be looking at that in the coming transfer windows. Chelsea Ultra asks, what are your thoughts on Mbappe? Personally, I think it could be disastrous if we were to get him. Any deal would be upwards of 300 million total. He's currently on nearly 1 million euros a week with wage and bonuses. A deal like that could smash out structure so much that it risks all other deals and could even put us on a path to becoming the next Barcelona. Then there's the huge ego and attitude. What if he does a Lukaku and results could be crippling? Sorry mate, I know it's a lot, but what do you think? I generally find the Mbappe transfer saga really boring. I just do. I'm not even trying to be contrarian. The bloke wanted to leave. He didn't leave. He signed a new contract and now he wants to leave again. It's like, mate, what were you doing signing that contract? And it just, there's a lot of stuff said about Mbappe, and it doesn't reflect great on the character, to be honest, the way he's acting currently. But I have little sympathy for PSG because this is the culture they've set up. So they're kind of getting what they're asking for. That's sort of the player that they want. So he's an incredible talent. He is a transformative player, one who you just watch him and you're a bit like Haaland. He does incredible things on the pitch, and he really does take the game to new levels for his team. I really think that. So there's no doubt that you'd love to see Mbappe. If I told you tomorrow Mbappe is going to sign for Chelsea, I think majority of people would be so happy to see that, because I do think he would absolutely improve our attack. There's no point trying to sort of deny that. It's just true. He is a brilliant footballer. But I think the questions, and I think a more general question in sort of football for me moving forward at the top level of European football that I find really fascinating is having players who are demanding specific roles or a license in their teams, particularly top European teams, who quite clearly are brilliant, but maybe offer things off the ball that a lot of coaches at the top level are now demanding of players. It's much more about the system. It's the system goes above the individual, and some people don't like that sort of power struggle at the moment, or sort of the balance of that, and maybe it's stifling a bit of artistry. I think I had this conversation around Rafa Leao recently, and it's going to be interesting to see how that works out, and also how long you're keeping these players. If the prices are going up and up for these players to astronomical levels, but you only get a Kylian Mbappe for like 3 years before he goes to Real Madrid, you have to ask yourself sort of like the cost benefit sort of analysis of that. But I think most people would still say, yeah, I'll have Mbappe at Chelsea, please, and watch him for 3 years tear it up. But political wise and kind of his character, it's not painted him in the best light, to be honest, and it does make you think there could be some red flags there if he was to make a move to a club not named Real Madrid, say next summer. OBX asks, renew or let number 5 leave for free? Obviously speaking about Jorginho, it's a shame letting him go for free. I do think we could still make a little bit of money on Jorginho, but I think obviously at this point you'd have to sell him in January, or you'd maybe do an Olivier Giroud type deal where you sign him to a 1-year contract extension. But probably Jorginho's age and also his durability, he'd probably still see himself worthy and capable of going on for 3 to 4 more years, which I still think is why the move back to Serie A just makes so much sense for him and his career. The style of football just suits him. I think he could generally go on to like 35, 36. I think in that league he really could, because he's not suffered many big injuries in his career, touch wood, and that's what has made him a valuable player for Chelsea. There's no denying that. But I do think this is the last season we should be having Jorginho. I really do. I just think it's time to move on. I really do. And I think there has been a peak of Jorginho quite clearly in 2021. He's coming down now. There's quite clearly still is going to be games where he's going to be very valuable for Chelsea this season. I think in games where we're dominant, I think you saw that quite clearly at the San Siro. But particularly what I see of the early signs of Graham Potter, and I think this was the same under Thomas Tuchel. This was arguably the same as far back as Frank Lampard. The team, I think, needs to move forward, and I think it needs a revamp. And I think Jorginho, and even we'll see what happens with Kante, his fitness problems and all that. I think probably leave for free maybe, but it's not the greatest deal. When I think Chelsea could have sold him for a bit more a few years ago. A Malik asks, Romelu Lukaku is a prolific striker and has shone on the big stage, but woeful in a Chelsea shirt on 2 stints. As Chelsea manager, how will you unleash his potential to become Chelsea's next Didier Drogba? Should he return from his loan spell at Inter? There is a big sort of if. Oh, now there's no Thomas Tuchel. It's a bit like the Tammy Abraham thing, right? Because there's no Thomas Tuchel now, do we see Chelsea buy Tammy and Tammy wants to return to Chelsea? Do we see Lukaku return? I'm not going to rule it out because that's really stupid in football to say he's never coming back to Chelsea. But I just feel that the boat has sailed, not only on him doing it at Chelsea, but I just think the mood around him became so toxic and just horrible, really, all around, the mood around it. And whatever you think about Lukaku, I just don't think it's healthy to have a player like that and have that sort of mood around him. I don't think is going to change at all. People feel very aggrieved about Lukaku. The way I saw people react to that interview was, whether you think it's valid or not, was very extreme, and they stayed the same way. And anytime his name pops up on social media now, and listen, social media, but this very much has translated into the bridge as well, with him being booed by sections. I think it was against Arsenal. I don't think it's a bit like the Sarri thing. I don't think there's a point continuing because I think it's unhealthy, and I think for the player's own sake, he quite clearly wants to be back in Milan. Hopefully Chelsea and Inter can facilitate a deal that becomes permanent next year. Listen, I think Lukaku has been a really, really good striker, and I'd still argue with anyone about that. I think he just, the numbers don't lie. He has scored a lot of goals in his career, and for a variety of reasons, it did not work at Chelsea last year. I think that's the end of it. I don't think we need to try and reboot that anymore, and I just don't think it's the healthiest thing to have him come back and have the whole mood change again, particularly if we're trying to build something longer term and positive with Graham Potter. Yasin James asks, who has the slower step over, Kai Havertz or Kurt Zouma? I think it is Kai Havertz, to be honest, because Kurt, I remember that run against Ajax, which maybe you're referencing, which could have been one of the greatest goals of all time. yeah, Kai, I know Yasin, he's if you haven't listened to the Tinkerman podcast, that part of like the Chelsea London is Blue pod, guys, really good tactical podcast, please go and listen to it. But yeah, Kai, yeah, definitely Kai needs to quicken up on that aspect. And finally, good friend of the show, That Chelsea podcast, a great Chelsea pod, and a great guy, Nick, who I connect with on a regular basis, and I was on the show recently to speak about Diego Day, so please go and listen to that episode. We end with a couple of questions here. Thoughts on a reported interest in a lot of Leipzig players been linked to Vardio, Nkunku and now Lema, and finally thoughts on Leao. Has whatever opinion you held on him changed after our 2 games against Milan? It is interesting. We're looking at, as you mentioned, quite a few Leipzig players. I'd say Nkunku is the one that is quite clearly the standout at the moment. Until a Leipzig player comes to Chelsea after Werner and really does something incredible, there's obviously going to be the fear that we're just going to have a repeat, and that isn't going to change until that player comes in. And if it is Nkunku, we're going to have a lot of that over the next 12 months until he arrives, if we do, of course, get a pre-contract agreement, whatever, with him. It's interesting. I mean, it's, and maybe it does link to the current clubs, like sort of interest in people who've worked in the Red Bull model and looking at that model as kind of a sustainable thing for the club, the multi-club model. So maybe they're just looking at that talent and thinking they could be good fits for what Chelsea are trying to build. Obviously, they would be first-team players. Nkunku would be the one there. On the second question, Leao... my opinion hadn't changed radically after the 2 games, to be honest. Based on stuff I'd read about him, based on stuff I'd sort of spoken about on this channel before, my impression of him was a very impressive and dangerous wide player who, when he gets the ball, can be really threatening. He's very direct. I like that about him. But he does have this flaw, as I was speaking about with Mbappe, of off the ball, off the ball work. And when you're not Kylian Mbappe is up here. Leao is obviously progressing in his career, but he's not quite to that level yet. He may get there eventually. You see the impact, particularly against a team like Chelsea, who have the threat of Reece James, who have a better quality of player. And that is something that maybe has to be worked on in his career. And will that be a barrier to entry at a club like Chelsea or any big club really going in for him? But Chelsea have shown interest. I also would just say the one thing that I did notice about him is, and this seems like maybe a small thing, physically I think he'd deal quite well in the Premier League. I noticed it very early on in the game against us at the Bridge, particularly on that pitch, how big he looked as kind of a wide player, but still obviously had the speed and agility to get past challenges. I think that is a part that maybe you look at wingers we bought like Christian Pulisic and Hakim Ziyech, who haven't dealt with that well. Werner did not deal with the physicality of the Premier League well. And maybe that is a part that is kind of overlooked at times, because he would go to a lot of Premier League grounds and would try, a lot of clubs, inferior clubs, would try and knock him off the ball and try and knock him of his confidence and really try and boss him out of the game. I think he quite clearly has that aspect to him, and that is really impressive. But that is it for the Q&A. Thank you guys for asking your questions. Great to get through them. Once again, we'll be doing the same next week. We'll see how the game shape up and sort of the new stuff. Sometimes I do mix around. I want to sort of get the Q&A back to a regular day, but obviously there have been a lot of big news stories and as well a lot of games to cover, obviously previews, reviews and all that good stuff. But thank you guys once again, and we'll let you know on my YouTube community page and also on my Twitter at SonOfChelsea when I'll be requesting the next set of questions for a video. But thank you guys for watching. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Hit that subscribe and notification bell, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.